Imagine looking out the window of your terminal and seeing dozens of bright yellow airplanes, just, well, abandoned on the tarmac, just sitting there with the crews having walked away in the middle of the night.
I mean, it paints an incredibly bleak picture. But on May 2nd, 2026, that wasn't some hypothetical scenario.
Right.
It was the actual reality across 26 different airports.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today we are opening up a massive stack of sources. We've got aerospace news reports, federal bankruptcy dockets, and raw financial transcripts.
Yeah, a lot of data to get through.
A ton of data. And all of it details the shocking overnight collapse and the liquidation of Spirit Airlines. Our mission for this deep dive is to uncover the fascinating, chaotic, and honestly sometimes bizarre logistical afterlife of a major airlines fleet.
Right, because what exactly happens to a massive fleet of commercial jets when a multi-billion-dollar company simply dies overnight?
Exactly. So here's the news hook, the 90-second rundown of the catalyst. On May 2, 2026, Spirit Airlines abruptly canceled all flights and began an immediate wind-down.
Just shut the doors.
Completely. The trigger was a massive spike in jet fuel prices sparked by a war in Iran. The airline simply ran out of cash. In an instant, they left over 17,000 employees jobless and 91 planes stranded.
Which is just a staggering logistical nightmare.
Oh, absolutely. We are talking about a 70% spike in jet fuel prices. That cost Spirit nearly $100 million in incremental fuel costs in just 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah. So to understand how 91 commercial jets became instant multi-million-dollar paperweights, we first need to look at the financial freefall that forced them out of the sky.
Well, the fuel spike was the final nail, but, this collapse did not happen in a vacuum. Spirit struggled for years to maintain its footing.
Right.
I mean, they practically invented the ultra-low-cost carrier model in the United States. You pay a rock-bottom fare for the seat, and you pay extra for literally everything else.
Bags, water, breathing the air.
Exactly, yeah. But that model started failing the moment legacy carriers introduced basic economy fares to compete directly with them.
Right, and they also faced all those failed mergers. Like, JetBlue tried to buy Spirit for $3.8 billion.
Yes.
But the Department of Justice stepped in and blocked the merger in early 2024, citing antitrust concerns. The argument from the DOJ was that absorbing Spirit would eliminate a low-cost option for consumers.
And following that blocked merger, the decline was just incredibly rapid. They entered a prepackaged Chapter 11 bankruptcy from November 2024 to March 2025.
So a prepackaged bankruptcy is essentially, what, a fast-track reorganization?
Basically, yeah. The company goes to its creditors before filing and agrees on the terms. In this case, they converted about $795 million of debt into equity. So
Yeah.
they emerged in March 2025 thinking, they had righted the ship.
But they hit a brick wall again just 5 months later,
Right.
in August 2025.
Yeah, 5 months.
And this time, the bleeding started with their primary credit card processor, a company called Elevon. The sources show Elevon suddenly demanded a $50 million collateral transfer. Plus, they imposed a holdback of up to $3 million per day.
Right, a huge cash drain.
Yeah. Let me try to translate this. It sounds like Elevon was acting like a nervous escrow service. Like, if I hire a contractor and put the money in escrow, but the escrow company thinks the contractor is going bankrupt, they freeze the funds. Is that basically what happened?
That is a very accurate way to frame it. I mean, think about the mechanics of buying a plane ticket. You swipe your credit card today for a flight that leaves, say, in 3 months.
Sure.
The credit card processor holds the risk during that window. If the airline goes bankrupt and you do not get to take your flight, you will issue a chargeback.
Oh, and the credit card processor is legally on the hook to refund you.
Exactly. So as Elevon watched Spirit's financial health deteriorate, they panicked. They started holding back millions of dollars every single day to cover potential future refunds.
Which means Spirit was bleeding cash just to process their own ticket sales. They were being starved of the revenue they were actively generating.
And that cash drain triggered a total domino effect. Right after Elevon clamped down, a major aircraft lessor named AerCap,
They're the ones who actually own the planes, right?
right, the company that owned many of the planes Spirit was flying, they sent lease termination notices for 73 aircraft.
Wow.
Yeah, that forced Spirit right back into bankruptcy court. They managed to keep flying while negotiating with creditors and the government, but then the final blow came in May 2026.
The geopolitical shock. Jet fuel prices spiked 70%. The administration attempted to negotiate a rescue package, but those talks hit an absolute impasse between creditors and the government.
They just could not reach a deal.
And without that lifeline, Spirit simply could not afford to fly. On May 2, they canceled everything. Flight NK-1833 from Detroit to Dallas was the final flight in their 34-year history. Okay, let's unpack this. If management knew the rescue talks were stalling out and the airline was failing, why leave 91 planes scattered across 26 different airports instead of flying them home first?
Well,
I mean, if I know my car is getting repossessed, I don't leave it parked at the grocery store. I drive it home to my garage. Why strand these planes on a massive corporate scale?
okay, your car repo analogy works, but you have to scale up the operational reality here. First off, an airline does not actually have a single garage large enough to park 91 commercial jets.
Oh, I guess that's true.
Yeah. If management directed all their planes back to a major hub like Fort Lauderdale or Orlando, they would run out of gate space and tarmac space almost instantly. You would literally have planes burning fuel circling the airport with nowhere to land.
So there physically isn't enough pavement to bring them all home.
Not even close. And beyond the pavement, it comes down to the brutal mechanics of cash flow. To fly a plane anywhere, you need to buy fuel, you need to pay landing fees to the destination airport, and you need to pay the flight crew.
Right.
By the time Spirit Management realized the rescue package had failed and they had to halt operations, the cash reserves were completely exhausted. They literally could not afford to put fuel in the tanks to move them. So when the music stops, the planes just stop wherever they happen to be parked.
But sitting still is also incredibly expensive, right? Airports charge airlines astronomical daily parking fees. You can't just leave a fleet of Airbus A320s at the gate, blocking traffic for Delta and United.
Oh, absolutely not.
Plus, the leasing companies that own these planes want them back immediately. And that brings us to the logistics of extracting them. Who actually goes in and gets them?
So the lessors bring in specialized recovery teams. According to the dockets, they hired a company called Nomadic Aviation Group. It was founded by Bob Allen and Steve Giordano. These companies are effectively the repo men of the skies.
That is wild.
Yeah, they specialize in retrieving aircraft for lessors and banks under incredibly difficult circumstances.
The sources mention that nomadic pilots often operate in plain clothes, like jeans and t-shirts. Sometimes, confused airport staff actually call the police, thinking random people are trying to steal an $80 million Airbus.
Which is a pretty reasonable reaction if you don't know what's going on.
Right. But I have a serious question about the mechanics of this.
Yeah.
Isn't it a massive security nightmare to just have guys in plain clothes showing up to fly a commercial jet away?
Yeah.
How do you even start a plane if the airline's entire ground crew has been fired?
It requires an insane amount of behind-the-scenes coordination. You are right. You cannot just hotwire an A320. First, Nomadic has to secure special ferry permits from the Federal Aviation Administration.
Oh.
Since Spirit's maintenance tracking software went dark when the company died, the FAA has to verify the aircraft is actually airworthy to fly. Then, since there are no Spirit baggage handlers or tug drivers left, Nomadic has to hire local third-party contractors at each airport just to push the plane back from the gate and provide ground power to start the engines.
So they are piecing together an impromptu ground crew at 26 different airports.
Exactly, and doing it while airport security is highly suspicious of them. To a baggage handler, a guy in a hoodie boarding an empty jet looks like a hijacking. The pilots carry extensive legal documentation proving they are authorized agents of the leasing company, working in tandem with the FAA and local authorities.
The human element of this repossession process is just wild. Nomadic actually hired newly unemployed Spirit pilots to do some of these ferry flights.
Yeah, that was a fascinating detail.
Bob Allen noted it puts some temporary money in their pockets, but it also provides a weird sort of emotional closure. You were essentially paying these pilots to drive the hearse for their own careers.
It really highlights the devastating toll on the workforce. Over 17,000 employees lost their jobs overnight. But there were moments of incredible grace amidst the chaos, too.
Oh, I definitely want to highlight Captain John Jackson. The reports show he was supposed to fly his final retirement flight on a Spirit Airbus from Fort Lauderdale to Baltimore on the exact morning of the shutdown.
That is just heartbreaking timing.
Right. Instead, he showed up to the airport and found out his career was over and his flight was canceled. He ended up flying to Baltimore as a passenger on Southwest Airlines. A Southwest pilot heard his story, and when they landed, Southwest arranged a water cannon salute on the runway, champagne, and a cheering crowd in the terminal. They gave him a hero's welcome.
That speaks volumes about the solidarity within the aviation community.
Truly.
But returning to those empty Spirit jets on the tarmac, the ferry flights themselves are deeply surreal. Since there are no passengers, the pilots fly with the cockpit doors wide open. There is no one to secure the flight deck against. They act as their own dispatchers, flight attendants, and ramp managers.
The source material even notes they were eating leftover Spirit snacks from the galley carts, because there's no catering for these flights. Just plainclothes pilots eating stale peanuts in an empty bright yellow plane flying it across the country.
And their destination requires a very specific environment. They cannot just park 91 planes in a humid coastal city like Miami.
Right, destination, the desert. Within 8 days of the shutdown, Nomadic moved the planes to specialized boneyards in the Arizona desert, specifically Goodyear Airport and Pinal Air Park. I look at the Arizona desert like a giant Tupperware container. It perfectly preserves these billion-dollar assets.
That's a great way to put it. The climate is the ultimate natural preservative. Aircraft are highly susceptible to corrosion. If you park a jet in Florida or New York, the high humidity and constant precipitation will rapidly degrade the metal airframe and destroy the sensitive avionics.
It's like leaving an open laptop in a damp basement for 6 months. It is going to corrode. The Arizona desert, with its extremely low precipitation and negligible humidity, stops that clock.
Right, exactly.
Once they land, they seal the planes up, they cover the engines, tape over the windows, and plug all the pitot tubes and sensors to keep the bugs and dust out and sit there waiting for new owners. But this brings up a huge logistical question.
Okay, what's that?
Spirit's fleet was relatively young. The average age was only 7 years old, consisting mostly of 81 Airbus A320s and 50 A321s. With an 8,000 plane backlog at Airbus right now, my first thought is Delta or United would just walk over to the gate, peel off the yellow Spirit sticker, and fly it away. Why do they have to go to the desert at all?
Well, that assumes the aircraft are legally clear and mechanically vetted, which they aren't. A bankruptcy creates a mountain of legal and financial red tape. The aircraft lessors must formally extract the leases from Spirit through the bankruptcy court proceedings.
Oh, I see.
And beyond the legalities, there is the mechanical custody chain. If an airline fires all its mechanics overnight, who is verifying the maintenance logs? A commercial jet without pristine, verifiable maintenance logs is legally worthless.
So the FAA has to comb through the records to ensure Spirit actually maintained them properly during their financial death spiral?
Exactly. After that rigorous inspection, a new airline has to negotiate a new lease. Then they have to rip out the high-density Spirit seating, design a new interior, and repaint the fuselage. All of that takes months of preparation. The desert is a safe, dry waiting room while the paperwork catches up to reality.
But there is another major headwind, right? The same 70% fuel price spike that killed Spirit is making other airlines hesitate. Operating a plane is incredibly expensive right now. Airlines are looking to pause their growth, not instantly absorb dozens of new jets.
Which brings us to the most counterintuitive outcome of this entire situation.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the sources indicate some of these 3-year-old planes might never fly again. And it involves a bizarre twist in the aviation supply chain where destroying a perfectly good modern plane is actually the most profitable move.
Right, we're looking at the parts paradox.
Yes. The financial reports show that many of Spirit's later generation Airbus A320neos might be scrapped entirely. It is like having a 3-year-old used car where the tires and the engine are suddenly worth more on the black market than the entire drivable vehicle. It seems absolutely crazy to scrap a 3-year-old airplane. Does this mean Spirit's collapse is actually a goldmine for airlines desperate for spare parts?
It absolutely does. And the mechanism behind this paradox traces back to a massive global recall in the engine manufacturing world.
Okay, let's get into that.
Pratt & Whitney produces the PW100GJM geared turbofan engine, commonly known as the GTF. These are the engines that power the Airbus A320neo family. But Pratt & Whitney discovered a rare condition in the powder metal used to manufacture certain high-pressure engine components between 2015 and 2021.
Let's drill down into that. What does powder metal mean in aviation, and why does an anomaly ground a plane?
Well, inside a jet engine, the components are subjected to unimaginable heat and stress. To handle that, manufacturers use advanced metallurgy, creating parts from specialized superalloy powders that are compressed and baked. If there is even a microscopic impurity or anomaly in that powder metal, it acts like a stress fracture waiting to happen.
Like a tiny invisible air bubble inside a car windshield that suddenly causes the whole thing to shatter when you hit a pothole on the highway. Except here, the pothole is 30,000 feet in the air.
Exactly the risk they cannot take.
Yeah.
Because of this powder metal anomaly, the components could crack and fail prematurely. So Pratt& Whitney issued a massive global recall, grounding nearly a third of the entire global A320neo fleet.
A third of the fleet. That is huge.
It is. Every affected engine has to be completely removed from the wing, disassembled down to the bolts, inspected, and rebuilt. It is a painstakingly slow process that takes months per engine.
Which creates an extreme bottleneck. The statistics on this shortage are wild. Because functioning GTF engines are in such incredibly short supply, a working engine was selling for $14.5 million in early 2026. That is up from $11.3 million just 3 years earlier.
What's fascinating here is the brutal mathematics of aircraft leasing. Look at the options a lessor has with a 3-year-old Spirit plane sitting in the Arizona desert. Option A, they can wait 6 to 9 months to navigate the bankruptcy red tape, redesign the interior, and find a new airline willing to lease the whole plane.
Right, assuming they can find an airline willing to take on the high fuel costs.
Exactly. Or option B, they can strip the engines off today and sell them immediately for $14.5 million each to an airline that desperately needs to get its own grounded planes back in the sky.
When you add in the salvage value of the landing gear, the complex avionics computers, and the auxiliary power units, the chopped-up parts are worth significantly more than the intact working airplane. The demand for specific working components has completely outstripped the value of the assembled product.
It really has.
Aviation data reporter Ishka noted that up to 10 A320neos could be sold to the part-out market in the first half of the year alone. That is just incredible to think about.
It highlights a severe distortion in the global supply chain. But, the dissection of Spirit's physical planes in the desert is just a mirror of how competitors are picking over the carcass of the airline's corporate assets back in the boardroom. Spirit is liquidating absolutely everything to manage $2.8 billion in funded debt and $5 billion in lease obligations.
So they aren't just selling planes. They are selling the intangible assets that allow an airline to function. For example, gate leases at major airports are highly coveted real estate. Spirit held preferential use gates at Chicago O'Hare. The bankruptcy court just approved the sale of those gates.
Yeah.
American Airlines swooped in and bought 2 gates for $30 million. United Airlines bought another 2 gates for $30.2 million.
The legacy carriers are simply absorbing the pieces. And it is not just the physical real estate or the engines. Over 2,000 highly trained Spirit pilots are flooding the job market right now.
And the timing is brutal. The same high oil prices that caused Spirit to collapse are forcing other airlines to pause hiring. So the supply of pilots has suddenly spiked right as the demand is dropping.
It's a very tough spot for them.
Yeah, I read a quote from a former Spirit pilot, Brendan Keene. He pointed out that when he was furloughed previously, he was competing against maybe 500 peers. Now, he is competing against over 2,000 pilots, many of whom are highly experienced captains with thousands of hours of piloting command time. So what does this all mean for the industry moving forward?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the fall of Spirit isn't just a single corporate failure. It is a massive redistribution of wealth, talent, and infrastructure across the remaining legacy carriers. Think about it. Spirit forced the major airlines to adapt. They forced Delta, United, and American to introduce basic economy fares. But in the end, Spirit simply did not have the financial buffer to survive a macroeconomic shock like a 70% spike in fuel prices. Now, those same legacy carriers are scooping up Spirit's gates, their pilots, their engines, and eventually their entire market share.
It really is the circle of life in the corporate world, just playing out on a massive multi-billion-dollar scale. The next time you step onto a flight, you might not see that bright canary yellow paint job on the tarmac.
No.
But you very well might be sitting in a repainted Spirit Airbus. Or perhaps you'll be flying on an airplane kept alive by an engine salvaged from a Spirit jet sitting in the Arizona desert. The ghosts of Spirit Airlines will be flying with you for decades.
They certainly will. The brand may be dead, but the physical assets will outlive it by a long shot.
Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. We started by picturing those abandoned planes sitting quietly at the terminal gates. But think about the wild logistical journey that happens to them next. If a 3-year-old, fully functional commercial jet is worth more chopped into pieces in the desert than it is flying passengers across the country, what does that say about the extreme fragility of our global supply chain? Maybe in the modern world of aviation, the real power isn't in owning the airplanes. It's in owning the parts.